Hey, you all, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to the No-Till Market Garden Podcast, episode 30, season 2. We've officially done more episodes in season 2 than season 1, and we have 5 left? 6? I think it's 6. You'd think I'd know this. Anyway, on the podcast today, I caught up with one of my favorite humans, Mr. Cliff Davis. He and his wife, Jen, run Pig and Leaf down in Summertown, Tennessee, but they may be more well known for running Spiral Ridge Permaculture, which they recently decided to shut down. So we talk about why they did that. We talk about hedgerows. We talk about their no-till practices. We talk about permaculture and specifically sort of the culture of permaculture training, which is kind of interesting and been on my mind a little bit. Anyway, great episode, and I could not bring it to you without the help of our show sponsors, like BCS America.
You already know about the legendary versatility of BCS two-wheel tractors on the small farm. You know it's the most economical and time-saving choice for market farmers, building beds with the rotary plow, mixing amendments with the power harrow, and mowing cover crops with the flail mower. But a BCS two-wheel tractor can do much more beyond the small farm. BCS powers more than 40 high-quality PTO-driven attachments, each with the power and performance of an all-gear drive transmission. Blow snow with BCS's snow thrower, also known as the snow cannon. Chip and shred debris with the chipper shredder. Clean your property with the pressure washer. Irrigate your lawn or garden with the high-pressure irrigation pump. Haul over 800 pounds, including yourself, with a rideable utility trailer. And now, spread compost evenly over 30-inch beds with the all-new spreader attachment. Yep, BCS is pretty much the Swiss Army knife of power equipment. Check out bcsamerica.com for the latest attachments, videos, promotions, and more. That's bcsamerica.com.
Also sponsoring the show today, Farmers Web.
Farmers Web software makes it easier for your farm to manage working with your buyers. By lessening the administrative load and increasing efficiency, Farmers Web helps you save time, reduce errors, and work with more buyers overall. Our free account includes features to manage your real-time and coming-soon product availability, and tools to create your own availability calendar to inform buyers on the seasonality of your products. The free account also includes access to the Farmers Web Guide to Working with Wholesale Buyers, which offers pro tips and best practices on how to work with restaurants, schools, and other similar buyers. A 1-month free trial is available of the paid account, which includes features to manage your customers and orders, give select buyers special pricing and payment terms, track your buyers' payments, send invoices, keep detailed sales records, and much more. You can even manage orders for buyers who don't place them online. Access a demo video and learn more at farmersweb.com.
Big thanks to our show sponsors, and enough from me. Let's get to our amazing interview with Cliff Davis of Pig and Leaf. Cliff Davis, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jesse. Great to be here.
And great to have you. Super excited to chat with you, Cliff. So I thought, like we always do on this podcast, maybe you could give us the rundown. Where is Pig and Leaf? How much acreage are you working on there? And those sorts of things?
Right. We are in Summertown, Tennessee, just about an hour and a half south of Nashville. We have 50 acres. Right now we have 50 acres that we have a diversified farm on. We do woodland pork, and then we have high-intensity vegetable production, flower production, and also woody perennial production. We have a small little nursery. We started out about 12 years ago. The land was clear-cut, and it was bought by 4 friends. And we all had our own little piece of property. Some had 30 acres, some had 11 acres, 3 acres, and 7 acres, or something like that. And since then, we have bought all of our neighbors out, and now we own all the 50 acres. We've been off-grid up until literally this week. We finally got our electric in for the farming operation. Our homestead is still off-grid, and somewhat like you, we started out as homesteaders, and now we're actually profitable farmers. We started out 12 years ago as an educational and design business called Spiral Ridge Permaculture. Jennifer and I started that just because it was kind of what we were doing at the time, and we really wanted to pull in the people and the educators and the designers into this particular piece of property because it was clear cut and it was really degraded. And so we started teaching and co-teaching with other teachers and then doing design work. We most recently got rid of or closed down Spa Ridge to focus more on Pig and Leaf, which is our newest operation, farm operation. And since then, I guess as a market garden, we've been open 3 years, but we've been selling for several years before that, just to neighbors and friends. So I guess that's kind of the gist of it. Everything we do here is based on agroecology and permaculture and ecological systems, and we focus a lot of our energy on farming water and carbon and hoping that whatever comes out of the earth after that will actually provide us an income. But that's somewhat of our focus. We raise 4 children out here. We have also some co-farmers. We're trying to really prepare ourselves for succession as far as farmers are concerned and who's going to take things over, not assuming our kids are going to do it. So we now have a couple of farmers out here that are living with us, kind of creating a little agrarian neighborhood. That's
neat. Okay, so I'm going to want to dive into that co-farmer thing in a minute, but I want to get a couple more details. So when you were closing down Spiral Ridge, I'm assuming that you kind of had to make a decision between those two. Can you talk a little bit just so we're clear? I understand that Spiral Ridge was more the education side, and Pig and Leaf was more of the farming side, like market farming side.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, so then you kind of had to make a decision between which one of those to keep running, I assume, or what kind of went into that?
Well, what really happened was in buying all of our neighbors out, we had to figure out a way to really start increasing our income and not living so much as homesteaders, just making enough to make it through the year and growing the rest of everything. We literally had to figure out how to make a huge land payment. And so we decided to close down Spa Ridge. I was kind of losing my love for teaching and just really into learning how to create systems in a diversified farm. And that kind of pulled us along. Jennifer was really fascinated by flowers and flower production and woody perennial production. So we decided to start Pig and Leaf as our newest endeavor and close down Spiral Ridge because we just could not do both. It was just too much stress on our family, and it was a big decision because that was a large part of our income, but we decided to do it, and I've never been so happier not having 2 businesses running simultaneously.
Right, because you're able to more focus your effort and do the one that you are more drawn to, right?
Right. Yeah, it's just following our bliss, so to speak. We just things changed. We followed something new, and Pig and Leaf is what we really wanted to concentrate all of our efforts on.
And then you said you were like an hour and a half from Nashville. Is that your main market?
Actually, our main market is a small town just north of us called Columbia, which is kind of a bedroom community outside of Nashville that's gaining a lot of publicity as far as the people that are moving there, the arts and crafts of the area. And then we also, we sell to Nashville restaurants and chefs and some aggregators, and we might be even joining a farmer's market up there this year.
It's great. I sold in Nashville for several years, and we sold over at the Richland Park Farmers Market with some great growers over there and some great chefs. And I think the Nashville scene is really amazing, and people like Rolf and Daughters and Folk and all those guys, they just do such a good job, and it's amazing how the two have kind of fed off of each other. to sort of build that community. I think I love seeing that the chefs supporting the farmers and the farmers really working well with the chefs and the aggregators.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's growing kind of simultaneously. It's like a cow needs grass and the grass needs the cow. It's all of the chefs and restaurants in Nashville are just eating up local food and local farmers, and more farmers are starting every year. It's just a great little local food hub.
So I want to talk a little bit about the co-farmer thing that you mentioned. Is that something that you've kind of outlined exactly how that looks, or is it something you're sort of slowly wading into?
It's slowly wading into, yeah. We've been doing apprenticeships or internships for quite a while, and those have been excellent, but we really needed someone. I'm getting close to 50 years old now, and I'm still in pretty good shape, but to have some youth on the farm that we can rely on and also supply land and resources to was a major part of our decision to bring on people that into our landscape and to help us on the farm. And so we've been blessed to have found that, and right now we're still working out the details. Basically, the first year is they get supplied with an income, and then they also get housing and food and gas and electric and all of those things, and we have that outlined in a contract. And then if they last another year or so, then we can start talking about profit sharing and where they might want to build a house in the future, or do they have any particular endeavors that would actually help on the landscape kind of synergistically, like say raising goats or et cetera, whatever it might be, that we don't have going right now, but we would like to see happening. So it's kind of an open end right now, and we're learning how to work towards it. There's not very many models, obviously, so that's the biggest question. I think you have to really navigate it cautiously and compassionately also. So it takes some time, but we are working. That's what our main goal is, to work towards having somewhat of an agrarian neighborhood. That's what we would call it.
Yeah, that's great. I love that, because we all kind of, I don't know, especially I can certainly speak for ourselves that where Hannah and I, when we were starting out, of course we wanted to do all of the things because all of the benefits of having, every kind of animal and every kind of vegetable, fruit, flower operation, all of those things. But to try and do all that on your own it's just impossible. And it's cool because I think like as many of these ideas and models as I can pluck out of people with the collaborative farming, I've threatened to start a whole podcast about it, but I know Hannah would kill me. But yeah, I mean, I think that is something that we should all be working towards. You mentioned earlier the off-grid thing, and you all had like a crazy storm or a lightning strike. Do you want to talk about that and how that kind of affected your operation? This was 2 years ago?
Yeah, it wasn't too long ago, really. We had a crazy lightning storm come through, and it hit our off-grid well, which did about $4,000 worth of damage. And at that point, we really sat down with each other and said, do we really want to go further with this? And we decided we did want to keep going. And we reached out to the community our community around the world, and looked for funds through GoFundMe, and got the funds to clear the land, to bring in the electric. And we're so happy with it now, because now we can have walk-in coolers, and we can have a proper wash and pack station. We can have heated greenhouses that are using automation in the future and electricity to easily run anything, instead of having to start a generator or to wait on the sun. Or it's pretty impractical to be off grid and to try and run a very intensified farm. And so we dove in. We utilized that money to clear the land, to bring in the electric, and now we're rebuilding the water system literally right now. And we're we're really excited. We've really chosen to invest everything we can to make our lives easier and to diminish the bootleg stage. You're just constantly bootstrapping and doing all these things just that make no sense. We're trying to eliminate those so that we can have more time in our lives to enjoy our family and our friends. So, yeah, it was a big hit. I felt very disempowered by it, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, that's, I mean, I can only imagine. And I know, having tried to farm off grid, and I've talked about this with a few people, but it's tough. And because everything has to be so intentional, there's a lot of things that make that really challenging, and really challenging to do it in a way that's sanitary. That's one I think about a lot.
That's a big one.
But do you feel like you're kind of headed in that direction where, you still kind of have the homestead that you want, and you're also developing a farm that's taking care of, sustaining you financially?
Yeah, I do actually. Our homestead, our house site is still off grid. The farm operation is on grid now, and our profits have increased every year. We meet all of our projections every year. I don't think there's a problem making a living as a small farmer. It's the commitment that you have to make in order to just keep moving through it. And you know how it is. It's one thing after another. If it's not rain, it's lightning. If it's not, you're dealing with a lot of ups and downs in farming. So I'm very, very happy and very pleased. Yes.
So Pig and Leaf is kind of 50, would you say it's kind of 50-50 sort of I'm assuming mostly pigs, I think, right? And then market gardening, is that kind of how it breaks down?
Yeah, that's right. We have we mostly sell directly to chefs, our pork, and then our vegetable production and our flower production it's about a 2.5 acre site. It's all terraced, and it has swales and pocket ponds and alley cropping systems for the agroforestry people out there. So we're basically doing real thick fruit hedgerows, and then raised bed systems on terrace, and then more fruit and hedgerows, and then annual production on terrace again, all the way down the hillside. And then that is integrated with moving water and catchment ponds that overflow into each other. So it's quite an elaborate system. Just recently, we started building on a flatter area, the more traditional, just 30-inch wide, 50-foot beds, just keeping it really straightforward, because the curved beds and the terracing has proven to be a little more work, and also hard with like drip tape and agribon and shade cloth and stuff like that. So we're navigating our way through it, but so far so good.
Right, I hadn't thought about trying to stretch agribon over a contoured, curving bed.
Yeah, right. And the beds seem to just want to go down the hill.
Right. Okay, so I love that you kind of do the hedgerow, alley cropping stuff, and I would love to get into that for a minute if you're willing, because this is something that I think a lot of people have interest in. But there's not quite enough information yet out there about designing a good hedgerow. And so can you kind of talk about that process, talk about the fruit hedgerows and sort of anything else you've done in that vein?
Sure. Yeah, so we basically have planted all of our hedgerows with various types of fruits, and then also cut flowers, spring ephemerals, nitrogen-fixing shrubs that we can just chop and drop right in place as a no-till method. And our fruits are typically planted very densely on about 4-foot centers, and that includes apples, peaches, plums, jujube, and other different various fruits and nuts. But the idea was that they would be heavily pruned, and that they would be just as probably semi-intensive compared to our intensive managed garden beds. And so far, so good. So we prune a lot during the summer months, actually, which is a little differently than the winter months, following some of the French espalier models and systems as far as the fruit production is concerned. And then we chop and drop a lot of all the other stuff like comfrey and different nitrogen-fixing shrubs and all kinds of different perennial native shrubs and bushes, stuff like that. The idea is to have it pretty thick in there, but not too thick. The problem has been some of the species selection was actually not a good species selection, to tell you the truth. You know, you don't want to put things like mulberries and stuff that have really spreading roots near your garden beds, because they'll just go to all your garden beds. So that's been a problem. We've been pulling a lot of those out. But the idea was that it would protect from the north winds, and it would still provide us some fruit and also some cut flowers and also the beneficial insects and birds and all of that. But the problem, the other side of that, is that it also houses rabbits and voles, cucumber beetles. They all go into the hedgerows and they hang out until you plant something that you might want to sell, and then they decide to go into the system. So that's been a learning process. I hunt more now than I used to. I first saw it as a problem, and now I see it, oh well, I just have, you know, more food available for the family. So, and then, you know, of course, the deer population's also been pretty rough on us as well. So, because we don't have exterior fencing that's 12 feet tall or anything. So there's some goods and some bads, and I've seen a lot of people doing it and interested in hedgerows to outline or to protect or to be beneficial for their crops. But the problem has been weed seeds, pests, and the root colonization of the beds.
So if you could do it over, would you do those hedgerows with different species, or would you move them? Like, what would you change about that setup?
I would probably supply a little more. There's probably 10 or 12 feet width on the hedgerows, and they're really dense with all kinds of things in them. But I probably wouldn't have them as dense. I would have them a little spaced out a little more so that there's some movement and you can see through it, and you don't have to manage it as much. And I would utilize roots. I would pay attention to the roots, and like, for instance, figs and mulberries and anything in that family, the Moraceae family, is going to just take over your beds and come into your beds, and we're constantly trying to chop those out. So leaving a little bit of room, and then just I would plant them all at once in the species that you want, which would allow you to get rid of a lot of the grass seeds and stuff that's going to want to grow involuntarily into the open areas. That's some of the stuff I've noticed so far.
And with those fruits on 4-foot centers, are you doing those on dwarf rootstock?
I have. Well, I grafted all the varieties, and some of them are on dwarf rootstock, some of them are on semi-dwarf rootstock, and then some of them are on semi-dwarf rootstock with a dwarf interstem between it. So there's a little bit of everything that I'm trialing, but most of them are dwarf rootstock, and they have trellises, and then I do a lot of the permaculture orchard system where I'm using wires to pull the limbs down and then pruning really hard during the summer months.
You mentioned some nitrogen fixing shrubs. Comfrey, are there other ones that you kind of use or recommend?
Yeah, I really like the amorphas. So the Amorpha canadensis, California, those are really great ones for our area. Fruticosa as well, which is a native indigo bush. There's a lot of indigo bushes, but Amorpha fruticosa is a really good one. Amorpha California, which is a desert false indigo, is also a really good one. And let's see, those are mostly the ones that I'm using right now. I don't think I have any other out there that I've been utilizing.
Okay, yeah, that's great.
Of course, clovers, there's a lot of clovers in there too.
Right, yeah. Are you doing many berries in there too, or are you doing hedges of berries?
I am doing berries. I have mostly Aronia, Milana carpa, which is also a native chokeberry, but it's super high in phytonutrients. I have those growing. I messed up and grew some goji berry, which kind of just takes over and doesn't really give you anything. It's not really a good selection for our area. So I just chop and drop it, or I chop it and just feed it to the chickens or the pigs. And then, of course, there's gumi, which is an Elaeagnus species. And let's see, other berries that I have out there. I have red osier dogwood, not a very edible berry, if you ask me. And then we have blueberries and raspberries and blackberries. Yeah.
That's great. That's all a lot of great information. And it's funny that you brought up earlier the mulberries and the roots, because I spoke with a orchardist and I kind of explained what I wanted from a tree, and he's like, "Oh, it sounds like blueberries. You should, or mulberries. You should put some mulberries in there." And so I'm glad I got a hold of you, Cliff. This is super helpful.
Yeah. I did a whole line of them, and they literally, well, first of all, they were what brought the deer to my garden, because the deer love the leaves, and I was coppicing them to use the leaf to feed the chickens, or to ferment for something, or to feed to the pigs, or to just use as mulch. And that was the first no-no that I realized, a big mistake. And then the second one was I started noticing just the sprawling nature of the roots all over the place. And I quickly started to pull things out and not go that route. I think those are better off maybe in an orchard setting, or in a coppice hedgerow, but nothing near your vegetables or flower production, anything like that.
Are you getting much, if any, fruit off of those in terms of like a marketable item?
Not really. You mean off of the mulberry, off the fruit in general?
Off the mulberry, but the fruit in general, I guess, too.
We just started getting fruit. We mostly eat it on the farm. I've learned that I would never want to be an orchardist and have to market all of that and sell it all. So we mostly eat everything on farm, or we process it into jams and jellies. Usually we just eat it all. Oriental persimmons, apples, pears, jujubes. I mean, once they come ripe, we just eat it. And, it's like taking kids to blackberry picking. We hardly ever have enough to even freeze or put into jam because we eat all of it. So it's kind of the same scenario. We'd rather make our money on other things.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting thinking about that, because I guess it could be done really intensively, and you could make sure that you're getting, max yields off of all of these things. But at the same time, like, it's good for the homestead. So if it's not doing max yield and you kind of just want it for the beneficials, then it could be a nice bonus to get that fruit at the end of the season.
Right. It's an edible landscape. So we tell people, just eat what you see. If it's ripe, eat it, So that's usually the way it is around here.
Hey, you all, quick interruption for me just to say thank you to everyone for this year, for the support. Not been the easiest 6 months for us on our farm, but getting your support, even if it's just a post on Instagram or a shout out on Twitter or whatever, we really appreciate that every time. And if there's anything we can do to help right now, please don't hesitate to reach out. If you are a Patreon member at certain levels, or if you just bump up from, $2 to $5, $5 to $10, whatever, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs this week to JM Fortier, Kevin Keene, Ryan Gosser, William Henpin, and Yannick LaPlante. Big thank you to our patrons, especially right now. We just really, really appreciate everyone who's willing to kick in a few bucks to keep this thing going. All right, back to Cliff. So with the no-till gardens, I kind of want to hear the sort of overall arc of how you maybe used to farm them and how that's changed, if at all, since you kind of started your gardens.
Sure. So we started no-till probably 20 years ago. We learned from a lady named Emilia Haslett, and she was a student of Fukuoka. I was a student of Fukuoka and all the permaculture stuff, and so we've trialed like all kinds of different ways, from hay mulch to straw mulch to wood chips and now we're trialing the deep compost method. And so basically it's mostly pretty much like everybody else. We built raised beds, and we're minimizing every step that we can in flipping the beds. Right now we harvest, we broad fork, we amend, we tilth, and then we add our amendments, then we tilth, and then we replant as fast as we can. And that's not really changing a whole lot. You know, the types of tools that we use are actually decreasing. I don't own I own a tiller, but I don't own a tractor. And it's working out pretty good for us, that methodology. However, with the amounts of rain that we get, the deep mulch system is not really working out as good as I thought it would have. I'm losing a lot of the soil because of the rain. It kind of just goes in the alleys and it washes down the way. So now we're kind of trying to tilth it into the existing soil to get that carbon in and mix with the topsoil, the clay, and that seems to be working really well. And we're just using the tilther for that. So we're shallow tilling it. Our preference is just to not till at all, but that's just not seeming to work as far as our bed systems are concerned. We've been trialing different material for the aisles as well. The best so far has been wood chips in our aisles and that's a big wood chip, and mixed with sawdust, and then you mix that with King Stropharia mushroom. That worked really well. However, I found that the soil broke down so fast because of the King Stropharia that we had to consistently be moving, either building up our aisles in really good matter, really good organic matter, or we would move the organic matter onto the beds, and then we'd get more weed seeds. So we're still trialing, to tell you the truth. And I think the biggest aha moment was just the realization that having caterpillar tunnels and high tunnels over your bed and having more control is the best way forward. And so that's what we're working towards now, is getting the Farmer's Friend caterpillar tunnels up and getting hoop houses up, and not individually covering and uncovering every bed, and also just the amount of erosion that's happening from the deep litter system.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm sure when you were here we talked about that, but that's been something that we've been fighting with a little bit. And it's, on the one hand, if you have it so that your paths drain really easy, you end up losing that compost straight out of your path. If they don't drain really well, especially in the kind of rainfalls that you and I get, the paths fill up, the water sort of rushes over the bed, and then it steals, and then it kind of creates like a little small, but, not insignificant little gullies through the top of the bed. And that can be an issue. And that's interesting with the King Stropharia, which is also called wine cap for anybody that may be unfamiliar. The issue that we ran into with that was that it would actually get washed out a little bit. It doesn't create like a perfect permanent mat immediately. But that also the fruit, when it fruits, it's often fruiting at a time of year when we don't have a lot of foliage over it, so you're not getting the same wine cap effect. So in terms of having it as like a marketable item, it wasn't quite as abundant as we'd hoped. So it didn't quite have the effect we wanted it to.
Yeah, that's been kind of the same scenario here. They're super perishable. They can come up and then they're gone really quickly. And the other thing, they always need more and more and more wood chips. So they always need more and more carbon to keep themselves happy. And I found that to be just a lot more work. It's like filling up the aisles with wood chips all the time just became a lot of work. So now we're just doing everything we can to just, the good old stirrup hoe, and use the stirrup hoe or the wheel hoe and just weed the aisles and just deal with it that way.
Yeah, we've actually found we'll lose a little compost into the aisles, and it's kind of built up as a mulch. And I remember Jay Armour said something to that effect, where he doesn't do anything with his pathways. His pathways are now just mulched from his beds. So it has a little cost there, but by the end of the season, mulch has kind of gone down, and you've cleaned out the weeds, killed the grasses with a hoe. So it kind of becomes mulched anyway, and that I've actually found is a better technique than putting the wood chips down, because the wood chips are so labor intensive. So when you lose those, it becomes very expensive, especially when they wash out.
Yeah, I'm noticing the same thing. That's exactly what's happening in our gardens. We have compost that's now an inch or two thick in the aisles. I'm not noticing as much weed pressure, and it's really kind of worked out haphazardly that it worked out that way, And so that's what we've been dealing with as well, and it works really well.
And then you said you didn't have a tractor. You're not. I'm assuming you're not making all of your own compost. Or are you buying it in?
No, I did the numbers on that. It's much easier just to buy it in from our local resource, which we get really good thermophilic compost. That's grass and leaf compost for $20 a yard. And then I, of course, have to. I don't know. I think we ordered about 100 yards this year. So we really, really, really concentrated on bringing in carbon. We're on a ridge. It's a rocky, non-agricultural ridge. Literally, that's what the agriculture extension agent calls it. So we're just bringing in carbon, and we're utilizing that thermophilic compost to help us. And then we just recently started adding peat moss to our amendments as well.
Oh, okay. So you're topping beds with peat moss, or you're just kind of mixing it in?
Yeah.
When you put down your amendments in a bed flip?
Right. In the bed flip, the amendments go after the broad forking, and we're using, I think, 2 buckets. It's a 50-foot bed, so it's like 2 buckets of compost and 2 buckets of peat moss, and just sprinkling it on there because we've already tilled in several inches of the compost in. So we just add that on top, and then we just go from there now. Instead of adding 2 inches or 1 inch of compost every time, it's just sprinklings now.
Okay, and are you doing remineralization every year as well?
Yes. Yeah, we use Logan Labs for all of our testing. We've been doing that for probably, 5 or 6 years, so we have a large amount of data. Some of our first beds are up to about 10% organic matter. So we just keep following what's been working, which has been just getting the carbon into the soil, and then also the Logan Labs test. And then my wife does all the analysis. Jennifer does all the analysis. And then we add all of the amendments accordingly in the spring and in the fall.
Interesting. I'm curious, if you've seen a pattern of those, when you add the more stable amendments, are they staying put, or are you having to add less of those every year?
No, they stay put. They basically, we will add the amendments and then, and usually till that in as well, just into the first inch. And, they're such small amounts. I mean, the problem's typically, how in the heck do we get, a cup and a half of boron onto a 50-foot bed, and those are typically the problems. Is it's not a lot of material that you have to put in there, but you want to get it on there where it spreads well and it's even. So that's been more of the problem.
Yeah, boron is particularly difficult because you don't want to add it. You only need a very small amount over an acre, and it's really fine. I guess that maybe a lot of people use this solubilized, like a water spray version of it, and that works as long as you have something growing, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, that one in particular. That's always interesting because remineralization. I've read a lot about it, and we've done it on our farm, and I'm still kind of on the fence about it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm always looking for somebody to definitively say, like, absolutely 100%, this is the way to go. Do you feel more on that side than on the still on the fence about it side?
Well, we figure, we might as well cover all of our bases. And soil is made up of chemical, biological, and physics. And so we're just trying to get everything, the biological, we're bringing in the compost, the chemical, we're bringing in the remineralization and the chemistry, and the hope is that we eventually won't have to keep doing that over time. But the testing really helps us to know every time what is actually available, how much nitrogen is really available to our crops. Because the first year we started growing, we were throwing Harmony all over the place, which is a chicken product, for those who don't know, and we already had high phosphorus in our soils. And our soils, our pH changed dramatically. It went up from like a 6.6 or 6.7 to like over a 7. And then our phosphorus levels went out the roof. We already had plenty of nitrogen levels available. So knowing all of those little intricacies within the Albrecht kind of system is also important. And then, of course, biology. And then now we're really fascinated by the Korean natural farming and some of John Kemp's work and the foliar feeding and the foliar spraying. So, I think it's really about integrating some of the best practices, and then, of course, just being studious and really trying to understand what's working and what's not working. Because in the soil field, one biological person says it's all biology, the other person says it's all remineralization, and you don't know what to believe. But I can only tell by just looking at my plants, and seeing how plants grow, how long they last in refrigeration, how long they last on the shelf, stuff like that. So as a farmer, I don't have all the testing for all of that, other than the fact that I'm just looking at my plants and making sure that they're the ones that are the indicators of how healthy everything is.
Yeah, I think that's super important, especially I've noticed the same thing where you have people who are very much on the remineralization side, and then other people who are saying it's all biology, in trying to find the balance or figure out not just who's right, but what's actually, as a farmer, going to benefit me and is actually going to get those crops grown and healthy into market.
Right.
Yeah, I think about that a lot, and I have no idea who's right because a lot of times they're selling something, and that just makes it so much more challenging.
Exactly. You have to decipher, and look at the underlying thing. And the fact is it's proprietary, and, you look at some of the compost tea methods, and some of those brewers are like, $4,000 or $5,000. You can't afford some of those techniques. It's hard to afford those at a small scale. So, the question's always, does this really work? Is this proprietary? Are they just selling me something? I like to believe, and I think I do believe, that that the majority of the people out there selling stuff are really trying to help farmers grow. But the question still is, especially from a permaculture perspective, which would say, well, can I just get the inputs from my landscape itself? And that's the kind of biodynamic Korean natural farming interplay that I think is going to become more and more popular.
I agree. The K&F stuff is really very interesting to me, and it's definitely picked up a lot of steam over the last couple of years. Have you all been collecting your own IMOs and those sorts of things?
Yeah, I read the Jadam book last year and started really looking into a lot of the teachers that are out there, and I've made some IMOs. I mean, I've collected some IMOs. I've also created some Jadam liquid fertilizers and Jadam micro fertilizers and stuff like that. And I'm still in the beginning stages of all of those learning systems, but and those natural systems. But from what I read and what I've studied, it's definitely a direction that we really want to go, and that's including within our chicken coops and also within our pig business as well. You know, because they have techniques for those types of systems. You know, spraying the liquid fertilizers on the bedding, on the deep mulch bedding.
In those liquid fertilizers with the Jadam, how does that differ? Can you give just kind of a basic what the difference is between the Jadam methods and then like the KNF method of IMO collection? Like, are those
right? Yeah, it seems to me that the Jadam is a little more streamlined. That's actually the son of the original founder of Korean natural farming who came up with Jadam. And so, for instance, if you want to create your your indigenous microorganisms in Korean natural farming, you would take some almost slightly cooked rice, put it in a box with some cheesecloth or something over it, put it in the woods, bury it, and then go back and keep checking on it and find out what kind of molds and funguses are growing on it to make sure that you can take it, and then you would add sugars to that and create the different IMOs from after that, 1, 2, 3, and 4. The Jadam is a little bit simpler in that in order to collect your microbes and your microbiology, you take a couple of boiled potatoes and you put those in a sock or a pantyhose and you hang those in your water. It's got to be non-chlorinated water. And I throw a little pinch of sea salt in there, basically C90. And then there's your collection, your dust that you get from the forest floor, you'll put that in another pantyhose and put it in the same barrel, or 5-gallon bucket is what I use. And then the potato starch actually creates the aerobic activity, which is just fascinating. And then it'll create a film on the top of the water. And when they call it like the pizza, the Jadam pizza, and it starts to grow and grow and grow. And right before it gets to the outside of the bucket, that's when you'll harvest it, and you'll make a 1 in 1,000 spray out of it. So for every 1 part of the liquid fertilizer, 1,000 parts of water. And you can also add it to the liquid fertilizer, the Jadam liquid fertilizer, which is basically an anaerobic fertilizer. And then you spray it on you foliar speed, or you drip it onto your landscape. So it's a little bit easier. It's a little more streamlined. But the Korean natural farming has so many more things like, the calcium, soluble calcium, the soluble phosphorus through the bones. There's just all kinds of different ways of doing it. And I think they all complement each other quite well.
Yeah, that's cool. I like the, kind of what you were saying earlier about doing as many things as possible. And I forget exactly how you said it, just what you were saying earlier about covering your bases and trying. Yeah, I think that KNF and Jadam, those are it's worth trying them because there's so much potential there.
Well, it's not very big. KNF is not very big, or Jadam is not very big in the States, but it's huge all over the world. A lot of people are using it. And the idea is, of course, to create solidarity and sovereignty of the farmer so that they don't have to bring in all these inputs. But if it's propagating itself so well around the world, it must work. And some of the people out there that are teaching it, they swear that, they're showing and proving that it does work. So we're pretty excited about that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is going to be something really amazing to watch over the next few years. Just watching that develop and watching it, be sort of integrated into agriculture in America, and specifically being able to use less of the tropical plants and more of the plants that were here as people kind of figure out how to do that.
Right.
I'm excited to see that happen.
Yeah, me too.
With permaculture, having done permaculture for so long, have your feelings towards permaculture changed, or how do you think about permaculture now?
Well, so the permaculture was always disseminated through the permaculture design course, and the permaculture design course was typically a 2-week course, and and that's a residential, so you'd have to leave your home, leave your farm, go somewhere for 2 weeks, and learn about design, and preferably on a site that would actually be doing those things. Nowadays, in the internet world, I feel as though a lot of that information is better distributed and disseminated through online resources, and without the huge cost to the person that has to leave their place for 2 weeks, but also have to pay that a couple $1,000s for the 2 weeks while they're gone. I think if I were to have $2,000, I would probably want to buy seed and tools and start gardening myself now, because the information is just out there. There's online courses that are free, that are parts of university systems. They're excellent courses. There's large-scale systems like Dan Doherty's Agrarian system. There's smaller-scale systems where it's urban-focused. I think the focus has changed. I think the internet is really changing the dynamics of permaculture and the permaculture design course. And we're just noticing a slow decline in registrations. And I think that says a lot about the evolution of permaculture and the permaculture design course in general.
That's interesting to hear. So you think maybe that interest in permaculture hasn't waned as much as access to permaculture information has increased?
That's what I'm saying, yes, definitely.
I think I would probably agree with that. I hadn't thought about it in terms of, we don't host like permaculture classes or anything, but just in general, kind of getting a sense for how people feel about it. It's cool to see more and more people integrating permaculture ideas back into the market garden, because I do feel like there for a time, I don't know, people were maybe less interested in it, and it felt less viable as a financial practice. What's your take on that?
Well, the problem I see with permaculture is that not very many people have shown that it's actually profitable in the marketplace as far as producing product that's sellable goods to consumers. It's mostly just selling information and experience. And I think that was actually some of the problems with permaculture in general, is that nobody ever proved that it was actually an agricultural model that could be profitable. I think we're seeing more and more of that with the permaculture orchard, with Mark Shepard's work, with some of the larger scale grazers, and then now some of the, what J.M. Fortier is doing with some of the work they're doing with hedgerows and super integrated permaculture systems. And of course, Richard Perkins, they're kind of leading the way in these diversified permaculture oriented landscapes. But still the question lies, is permaculture best for a homesteading lifestyle, which I believe that's what it's best for, or just is it good for the profitable market farm model? And the profitable market permaculture, I don't know, there's not a lot of examples of that right now. And I can say that the more diverse you get, the harder it is to make a living. So just having to pay attention to those types of things. I think the thinking and the design process and the common sense reality of permaculture is really important. But I think you can learn a lot of those things just by integrating yourself and interacting into a landscape. You just start thinking commonsensically. So I think that, permaculture is best probably at the homestead scale. And then there are some pioneers out there that are doing some of the profitable scale as far as market farming is concerned. I hope that answered your question.
It definitely does. Like, I think about the people doing it profitably being great guides for, people who want to learn how to do permaculture. But there has been, it's something you kind of said sparked this thought of like, there's also this, sometimes when I look at permaculture, I think it kind of can resemble like multi-level marketing. And you know what I mean? Where you're selling, I've seen permaculture classes that, they sell an idea, and then those people, they go take that design course, they end up starting more design schools, and then instead of being profitable farms. And that's not necessarily a knock on permaculturalists, but I do think about that. Like people like Richard Perkins and Fortier and others who've like integrated it, and yourselves like integrated into a business. I love that. And I think that's where people who are not wanting to be homesteaders should be putting their focus maybe.
Yeah, I think I actually agree with you. I do think it's kind of a top-down marketing scam, and it took me, or scheme, not scam.
Sure.
That was a Freudian slip, I think they call that. I feel the same way, actually. I really do. I don't feel as though that's what made our decision to stop. However, I feel as though I had this kind of reality check, whereas, we're just training more trainers to create more trainers, but people need to learn how to make a living. And I do think as though it's kind of a follow this model, sell it. You've taken the course, now you can teach it to anybody, even though you've never farmed or never even touched the landscape. So there's some flaws in that kind of model as well.
Yeah. And it's so interesting though, at the same time, like just as we've been talking, like there's so much potential in utilizing those ideas on a market scale. The zones and, diversified plantings, all of that stuff still has so much relevance, but the kind of, I don't know, it's kind of been taken up in this way that, it's been creating more trainers creating trainers.
Right.
And I don't know if it's necessarily a bad thing, but it is good to kind of name it. There's a person that you kind of mentioned earlier that, doesn't get a lot of attention, but you said the name in it, and it took me a minute to remember who it is. Emilia Haslett.
Yeah.
Can you talk about some of her work and were you able to work with her?
So Emilia was kind of way ahead of her time. She studied with people like Alan Chadwick and John Jevons, so these biointensive farming systems, over 20 years ago, 30 years ago is 20 years ago is when we got turned on to it. But she studied directly with Fukuoka, and then she applied everything that she learned and integrated all of that learning, and she created something called Synergistic Agriculture. And it was basically a profitable permaculture model where she utilized Fukuoka's techniques and ideas behind no compost, low impact, no sprays, stuff like that, into the market garden place. We learned it. We were living on a farm in Arkansas called Dripping Springs. Mark Kane, who's one of the best farmers still to this day I've ever met, and he had studied with Fukuoka. We ended up on his farm for a while, and that's where we found out about Emilia. Her only tour of the United States, she came to Arkansas to teach. We got there right after she had been there, so we were kind of in this little area in Fayetteville, Arkansas, that there were a lot of people practicing this synergistic agriculture. with some successes and some failures, but it was it still is a great model. She integrates a lot of like comfrey on the ends of the bed. She does a lot of she did a lot of intercropping. Unfortunately, she passed way too early in her career, and not a lot of information was ever put into a book or anything like that. So I never directly studied with her, but we studied with all of her students, and then we just followed that model for 15 years or so, but there were problems with it. Context is everything, and piling a bunch of heavy straw mulch in a very humid climate just gives you more and more problems like slugs, inefficiency, stuff like that. So then we started looking into these other models of market gardening. But the idea was to create biodiversity in your garden beds and within your garden, as well as growing food crops that are for market. It's still to this day something that still really influences the way we garden and farm.
Yeah, that's really cool. Do you have any other examples of specific examples of some of the things that she kind of promoted?
Yeah, she would put garlic or alliums on the sides of her raised beds to hold in the edges, and then her main crops in the center. On the ends of the beds, she would have things like comfrey and coreopsis and anything that would flower and bring in butterflies. And then the other thing was she would put bush beans, not for harvest per se, but she would put bush beans every 6 or 10 feet in each bed in the middle of the bed that would act like nitrogen fixers. So just basically scaling down kind of this food forest model into an annual agriculture system that had all of the beneficials, it had all of the bioaccumulators, and it had the nitrogen fixers, but within a annual context. And then she just utilized super heavy mulch. She never ever pulled any roots. She always left the roots, cut them high, and then let the roots just die in the soil, creating more carbon and more carbon pathways within the soil. And she never tilled. One of her only tools was a spoon. Crazy. So yeah, she was an amazingly sensitive and compassionate soil farmer.
That's super cool to hear. It's she's not somebody that comes up enough, and I feel like when she does, people speak glowingly about her work. But hopefully we can dig up some more of her stuff and try and get it out there, because I love the idea of the garlic border. I've never thought about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Next year I'm going to plant an entire bed just a garlic border in homage and check it out, because I can imagine it working really well.
Yeah, the scallions, garlic, leeks, very, very intercropped. She'd have 10 feet of lettuce, 10 feet of squash, 10 feet of something else in the same bed instead of just everything being the same. It was almost too many things, to tell you the truth. As you start to scale up, as you know, keeping tabs on that much intercropping is very difficult. So we're trying to figure out how to streamline that, and I think some people are doing a really good job at it. But trying to figure out what works for us,
Yeah, because it is definitely all about context. With interplanting, we've found that certain things that other people may work for other people haven't necessarily worked for us. In a large part, and I know you share this too, is humidity.
Yeah.
Sometimes our spacing just has to be a little wider in the summertime because the humidity gets so intense.
Yeah, it's just so, we have 100% humidity. It's always raining, so having things super close together and then also under 2 inches of straw mulch just does not work for us.
Right, it's a mold factory.
That's right, and slug factory.
And slug factory. Well,
yeah.
If only we could sell more slugs. That would.
Yeah.
We know how to grow them sometimes.
I think the biggest thing for anybody wanting to look at their market gardens from an agroecological perspective is to make sure that they understand how ecology works. And that ecology is always something that you can go back to and look at how ecosystems function and utilize that in a way that's going to be able to be integrated into your market gardens, whether that is to be intercropping each one of your beds, or every sixth or seventh or eighth bed you have a hedgerow, or you might put small ponds in your gardens to bring in the to have water, but also to bring in frogs and all kinds of different wildlife. And sometimes, you might win, sometimes you might lose. But for me, it's the journey and to try and understand how we integrate into ecology and what is our purpose in that and our point, and how do we steward that as good land stewards. So that's my biggest thing I can say is, ecosystems are the teacher.
Yeah, I love that. It's like what we were talking about earlier with, you have the biology people and the remineralization people. But I always tell folks, whenever you read a book about farming, always make sure to couple it with like going outside, going to a forest, just looking around, looking at how systems work in nature.
That's the best approach as far as I can. That's the best approach as far as I can tell.
Well, Cliff Davis, this has been an amazing conversation. I appreciate so much your time.
Thank you, Jesse. I really appreciate everything you're doing at No-Till Growers.
Well, thank you. All right, if you enjoyed that episode, make sure to follow Cliff and Jen on Instagram and all the places. Link in the show notes. Also, make sure to subscribe to this podcast. It will end in a little over a month, but it will come back in the fall and you won't want to miss it. So subscribe and leave a review. This week, all reviews must include something freaking happy. Am I right? Yep. Big thank you as always to Jackson Roulette and Josh Satin for their help with everything we do. Enormous thank you to Hannah Crabtree, my wife, for all she does behind the scenes. No one works harder. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next week. Bye. Yeah, and we're still going to try and make it down at some point. I'm going to try and get Josh Satin to come with me. I know he's like, don't go down there without.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
He's like, don't go down there without me. So, yeah.
That's great.